is and dovetailing can take two forms, probably many, but I'll identify two that I can think of. One of them is figure out how your movie can be instrumentalized by existing movements that you think are well guided. So that you go to a movie and say, would you be helped by media of some kind to help your fundraising, to help your getting the word out, to help getting people who won't read the books and whatever else? Is there a mediafication of this that would be animating? You know, you want to animate through information. That's one thought that often occurs to me, is that I'm trying to animate people through by informing them. But that leaves open how they'll become animated. So in one way you want to tap into what are the existing forms of animation that are already there and how can I better inform them? And I'll get to a metaphor for that in a moment that was very helpful to me once. And the other is, what that often does is preach to the choir. Because very often the choir just says to you, well, we believe in little green men, and therefore can you make a movie about little green men? Well, you already believe in little green men. That's helpful, I guess, but all you're going to do is keep playing that Robert Greenwald thing over and over to yourself.
I was going to ask about
Excuse me, please, in
face.
15 minutes, we have to be someplace
Is
else.
this too off on a bender?
like
This is great.
This is great.
You want to go call your mother before we
Oh, no,
go?
don't worry, she's okay.
Okay.
She just wants you to get to Bellingham.
How do you
and all that.
nerve?
No, she'll call my office and all that, everybody will be fine.
Okay, but do you want a break before we whisk you off to
Yeah,
the
because
next
we're going
place?
to go to the comm building and then class.
We have a walk that's 5 to 7 minutes
Yeah,
from
so
here?
take, yeah.
Well, let's leave when we have to leave. I don't have anything I have to do in between.
Okay.
Sweet.
That was,
Can I ask you one quick question?
Yes, but then I have to get back to your thing.
Okay.
Are you going to ask a question that's going to derail me? 'Cause I can
Yeah, you know,
finish in 1
I
minute.
might be slightly derailed.
Can you hold it for a second? Because I'll finish this one. It's not that long.
Do you mind if I put you on YouTube?
On YouTube? Yeah, I'm all over
Okay,
YouTube.
cool.
I don't mind that.
I was just going to
In
bring my
fact,
cat.
Sony said to me, hey, the movie's out on YouTube, and that's stealing our profit and whatever else. So I said, oh,
Well, let me
Yeah,
stop sponsoring. Let me stop sponsoring customers.
I went on YouTube, I saw how many people had watched the film. I went back to Amazon, saw how many people were buying the film. And I
Yeah.
called my guys at Sony back and I said, oh, I gave them a real talking to. I hadn't called anybody.
It was all checked out last night. I tried to rent it.
Good, really?
Yeah.
They
I was
were
gonna watch
selling
it.
it all over Costco too. I was
would you
surprised
teach me how to
many
look
they
at
had
YouTube?
Costco.
I've never looked at it.
They had a
YouTube.com.
lot of them at Costco. They had like the
Yeah.
whole
It's pretty
thing.
easy.
That
Pretty much it.
they were
Note to self,
show you if you want,
change
though.
tune on
I have a-
Costco.
Yeah.
You should hear my lectures against Costco.
they're selling it.
My Costco lecture series. Good. Okay, so here's a thought. I mean, capitalism will give you the rope to hang yourself, hang itself, not yourself. But here's the thing. What you have to understand, I think, on the flip side of this, is that here I'm drinking Unilever iced tea. It's fantastic. The company that destroyed my beloved Ben & Jerry's. Okay, here's the thing. So you have on the one hand the dovetailing so that you find yourself among people who can use media in ways that go beyond just the movie-going experience. That's one thing.
Right.
But you want to be oppositions shape each other, and I've often found that it's a military concept that as Bin Laden becomes cellular and kind of impossible to track and this and that, the only way you defeat Bin Laden is kind of going that way. You end up becoming what we're becoming, which is a much less transparent state. You have a non-transparent foe, you become a non-transparent, it's very common. So likewise, I think in some way what you have to figure out is that if you are operating at your best with pre-existing advocates of a cause, it's very often very helpful to be a counterforce. That very often people start breathing their own oxygen, they stop making arguments that are competitively powerful because nobody's compelled them to, and because they've increasingly insulated themselves. If you go back to that Abraham Lincoln concept, do I not destroy my enemy when I make him my friend? Part of the reason I go out of my way to absorb the logic and reasoning of others is that I want to know it. I want to know that my arguments are informed by a real, complete worldview, and it makes me much harder to argue with, because most of what people do when they argue with you is they find the things you have failed to notice. And so if you can weave those into your vision and still come out with a vision that you can believe in, it's usually a much more holistic outcome. And very often advocacy can reach a far greater audience than its makers initially realize if it simply would recognize certain basic truths. For example, Fahrenheit. Part of the reason that Christopher Hitchens
Right, and I read his.
went bananas and went off the deep end
Right.
in support of the Iraq War was that for Christopher Hitchens to watch a movie like Fahrenheit, Christopher has friends who are Iraqi, who lived under Saddam's
Right, right.
rule. And to watch Fahrenheit, there's only one shot of Saddam Hussein in the entire movie, and he's dancing a jig.
Right.
Like a grandfatherly, charming.
And the Iraqis are in the barber shop having a good time.
Yeah, and there's nothing charming about that, and there's nothing that's okay about that. And what it says is that he was willing to, he's so sheltered his understanding that he's doing something almost equally pernicious, which is to act as though Saddam's a great guy. The fact is, the more interesting thing is that Saddam's a bad guy with whom we were clearly very close friends. So I wanted to deal with that in my film because that's what's a larger issue, why we get in bed with people like this, not why they're actually okay. So the point being, if you rewind back, as you dovetail with organizations that are interested in what you're interested in, you want to try to make sure that you give them the power to communicate to people in a more comprehensive way than they're inclined to do. Because when you're an advocate, it's like being a Palestinian. When you're an advocate, you become pretty desperate and shrill ultimately, because you get ignored and ignored and ignored, and it's very hard to maintain the wisdom of the need for holistic intellectual rigor. It's very hard. It just goes out the window because it stops seeming like you're going to get noticed if you do that. So that's one thing. The other side of dovetailing is the dovetailing that says, in your own world, without having a group that you're having, just how do you construct your material so that it dovetails well with the public zeitgeist? You know, so for example, when something is afoot in the cultural ethos, if you can, often it feels, people say, a lot of people think I'm very crass about this stuff because I'm pretty market oriented. Like, you know, Dwight Eisenhower is in my film because I thought he was fascinating, but he's also in my film because at that moment, it was clear to me that Eisenhower was communicating something that was a shock to the problem of the American system of the moment, which is that there really was a dime's worth of difference between Republicans and Democrats through the entire lead up to the Iraq War and its prosecution. And that here you have a five-star general, hero of World War II, who clearly would not have been a supporter of the war, clearly would have been far to the left of today's Democrats on the subject. And what a shock to the system, what a revelation of something really deep-seated and disconcerting about where it's drifted. And so I was tuned into something where I was not just doing art because I was interested in him. I figured out that the thing I could do was actually very dovetail to the moment in a clever way. Because somebody could say, oh, that was a very cynical choice. You're just instrumentalizing Eisenhower for your purposes, which I don't think I was. I think I fell very strongly into support of a lot of what he was thinking. That made it easy. But in fact, I also understand as a side effect, yes, it's a strategically sound idea to take the hero of the last century and use him to fracture the machinations of the present. Because how are you going to argue with him? You want to beat Ike at that argument?
Is that dovetailing why you included the scenes with the pilots in it?
Yes.
The-
If you can put your cans in
Because it makes them
one of those
understandable.
paper bags, so the computers
Yeah.
can only look.